Glasgow, Scotland has seen its share of gangland bloodshed, but few killings have cast a shadow as long or as cold as the assassination of George Redmond, a feared Glasgow gangster whose murder remains unsolved more than 15 years later. A hit so precise, so calculated, that detectives still describe it as one of Scotland's most professional executions. This wasn't a pub brawl gone wrong. This was a surgical hit carried out in the heart of the city by a gunman who came to do one thing and vanished before the echo of the last shot died in the street. But who ordered the hit? Why was Redmond targeted? And how did a gangland execution carried out in a public street manage to slip through the cracks of Police Scotland, the media, and the entire criminal landscape? This is one of the most baffling cold cases in modern Scottish crime history, the unsolved murder of George Redmond, that rewrote the balance of power in Glasgow's underworld. Welcome to Crime Pulse. If you're hooked on true crime stories, from Glasgow's brutal gangland killings to Scotland's most mysterious unsolved murders, hit subscribe, drop a like, and ring the bell so you never miss a case that lands harder than a Glasgow kiss inside the UK underworld. George Redmond was born in Glasgow's East End, a city still scarred by the decline of industry and the rise of street violence. The 1980s in neighbourhoods like Bridgerton, Dalmarnock and Calton weren't playgrounds, they were arenas. Tenement blocks towered over narrow, litter-strewn streets, where unemployment and poverty bred gangs as naturally as the rain fell on the cobblestones. Kids learned quickly that survival wasn't a game, it was a strategy. Redmond's family life was complicated. He grew up around whispers of violence and the shadow of older criminals. As a boy, he witnessed arguments escalate into fights, disputes that ended in blood. The city was a classroom, and the lessons were brutal. Loyalty, respect, and fear were currencies. Weakness was a liability. By the age of 12, Redmond was already running small jobs for older gangs, stealing, collecting debts, and delivering messages that could carry consequences far beyond his own safety. School offered no refuge. Authorities were overwhelmed. Families struggled, and gangs filled the void. Redmond found himself drawn to older, more dangerous boys, learning the streets as they lived them. He became known for his quick temper, his sharp mind, and a willingness to fight. Early assaults, both provoked and preemptive, gave him a reputation among local youths. He wasn't just another street kid. He was someone who could enforce his will physically and mentally. By his mid-teens, Redmond was embedded in the local gang networks. He learned to handle knives, blunt weapons, and the intimidation tactics that would define his later criminal career. He was already testing boundaries. Petty theft, escalating into armed robbery, extortion of weaker peers, and targeting individuals for beatings to send a message. Word of his ruthlessness spread quickly. Those who underestimated him learned the hard way that Redmond was calculating, not reckless. The East End itself was a pressure cooker. Rival gangs, older enforcers, and drug crews constantly vied for control, and every interaction carried a risk. Redmond observed, learned, and inserted himself where it mattered. By 17 or 18, he wasn't just surviving. He was carving influence, staking claims, and beginning to operate with a level of brutality that set him apart. He had become someone who could terrorize his immediate environment, a young man already feared by the time most were still figuring out the streets. By the late 1990s, George Redmond had evolved from a street-smart teenager into a formidable figure in Glasgow's East End underworld. The streets he grew up on, cramped tenements, narrow alleys, and neighborhoods long abandoned by opportunity, had honed him into a man who understood violence not as a last resort, but as a tool, a language, and a statement. His early criminal record in the 1990s and early 2000s was extensive, though never fully publicized. Multiple convictions for assaults, knife crimes, and street fights built the foundation of a reputation that both police and the criminal community respected and feared. Each conviction, each public brawl, and each knife-wielding confrontation reinforced the fact Redmond was not a man to be trifled with. By 2004, Redmond's reputation for violence had already reached a public, almost infamous level. At a drug dealer's wake in Postle Park, he and his crew confronted two men over what they considered a minor disrespect. One of his friend's hair had been ruffled. The argument escalated quickly, and Redmond allegedly ordered a shotgun to be retrieved from a car to shoot the pair at point-blank range. The attack was only prevented when the wife of one of the intended victims threw herself over him, pleading for his life. 3 other mourners, including a convicted bank robber and murderer, intervened to stop the shooting. The incident, later referred to by media as the Pulp Fiction funeral, highlighted Redmond's willingness to respond to minor slights with extreme public violence. No charges were ever filed as witnesses refused to cooperate, a hallmark of Glasgow's tightly coded criminal culture. 2 years later, in October 2006, Redmond's disputes with rival dealers escalated into serious violence. David Mincy Mackenzie, a local drug dealer operating in overlapping territory with Redmond, became the target of a stabbing over a turf dispute. At a pub on Duke Street, Dennistoun, Redmond confronted Mackenzie and stabbed him repeatedly. Mackenzie survived but suffered serious injuries, and the attack sent a clear message. Redmond would not tolerate challenges to his authority. Once again, no charges were filed, with witnesses unwilling to speak. This incident further solidified Redmond's reputation as a man willing to use extreme violence to maintain dominance in Glasgow's criminal scene. Redmond's audacity extended beyond rival gangs. In the months leading up to his murder, he became involved in a high-profile confrontation with Michael Norden, a former Glasgow police officer turned drug dealer. After Norden accused one of Redmond's associates of theft, Redmond allegedly ran him over with a stolen Porsche, leaving him seriously injured. Redmond then reportedly demanded £6,000 from Norden for repairs to the vehicle. Police and media sources flagged him as strongly linked to the incident. Though no charges were ever brought, the attack demonstrated Redmond's ability to combine intimidation, audacity, and public spectacle to enforce his authority. Alongside these violent acts, Redmond also operated as a key enforcer for the McGovern cocaine network, collecting debts, managing turf, and enforcing loyalty through calculated intimidation. Unlike many street-level figures, Redmond combined strategic thinking with a willingness to use extreme violence, making him a rare figure in Glasgow's criminal hierarchy. Respected, feared, and virtually untouchable by rivals, over the years, a pattern emerged. Minor slights became violent confrontations, unpaid debts became personal attacks, and public acts of aggression, such as the Postle Park Wake, served as warnings across the East End. By 2008, Redmond's reputation had peaked. He had survived assassination attempts, enforced his dominance through violence, and left a trail of both fear and grudging respect. Every act, every assault, and every tactical move built a legend, one that ultimately made him a prime target for rivals seeking to reshape Glasgow's criminal landscape. Redmond, at 42, maintained a boozy lifestyle in the months before his death, often dining and drinking with friends, a pattern that would place him in public spaces where his rivals could strike. These behaviors, combined with his established reputation for retribution, set the stage for the events that would unfold. By 6 October 2008, George Redmond's routine had become predictable yet dangerously exposed. On that Monday evening, he spent the afternoon and early evening with 2 close companions, blending socializing with the same public visibility that had long been both a mark of confidence and a vulnerability. Around 7 p.m., the trio arrived at an Italian restaurant on Cambridge Street, just a short walk from the busy Sauchiehall Street. They lingered over dinner, enjoying drinks and conversation, unaware that rival factions had been monitoring his movements. After finishing their meal, Redmond and his friends made their way to the nearby Waldorf Bar, a familiar haunt, to continue drinking. As the night deepened, Redmond stepped outside the bar shortly before 10:30 p.m., phone in hand, catching up with calls and messages. His friend John Maguire lit a cigarette a few feet away, standing in the cool evening air. At this moment, Redmond appeared to be nothing more than a man enjoying a night out, yet the visibility he maintained, combined with his reputation for extreme violence, made him a clear target for anyone with a score to settle. Without warning, a black Porsche Cayenne SUV approached and drew up alongside Redmond. The window rolled down, and the gunman fired 9 rounds from an automatic pistol at a distance of roughly 15 feet, striking Redmond in the back. Maguire, standing nearby, was also hit multiple times. The attack lasted only seconds, leaving the city centre in shock. Emergency services were immediately called, and both men were rushed to Glasgow Royal Infirmary, roughly a mile from the scene. Redmond was pronounced dead shortly after arrival, while Maguire spent 8 days recovering under police guard. Investigators later discovered that the Porsche had been stolen from Springburn and carried false plates, identical to another vehicle registered in southern England. Witnesses reported seeing a blue Ford Focus traveling in convoy with the Porsche both before and after the shooting. Early speculation that the gunman had escaped on a motorbike was quickly dismissed. By the time the city absorbed the news, it was clear that George Redmond's reputation, visibility, and history of violence had intersected fatally. The meticulously planned killing marked the culmination of years of criminal escalation, a public, professional hit that would confound investigators for years to come. From the moment the shots rang out on the 6th of October 2008, Glasgow Strathclyde police understood that George Redmond's murder was no ordinary street attack. The execution was calculated, carried out in broad daylight, and the perpetrators vanished before the echo of the final shot faded. Officers from Anderston Police Office immediately launched a full-scale investigation, aware that they were dealing with a hit that bore all the hallmarks of organized crime. From the start, investigators faced a familiar challenge in gangland cases. Witnesses were reluctant to speak. Despite the public nature of the attack, fear of reprisals and loyalty to the East End's code of silence limited the number of people willing to provide statements. A third companion who had been dining with Redmond came forward days later, but his testimony offered context rather than actionable leads. Detectives immediately considered potential motives rooted in Redmond's criminal history. The stabbing of David Mincy Mackenzie 2 years earlier and the incident with former officer Michael Norden had both created enemies who might have sought revenge. Redmond's role as an enforcer for the McGovern cocaine network also placed him in the crosshairs of those who resented his authority or had been harmed by his violent methods. Intelligence reports suggested that rival gangs, possibly aided by individuals in the security sector, may have orchestrated the attack. Despite these leads, the investigation quickly ran into dead ends. The Porsche's destruction eliminated critical forensic evidence, and witness cooperation remained minimal. Police were forced to rely on intelligence from informants within Glasgow's criminal world, which often provided hints rather than concrete evidence. Over the following days, officers pieced together a timeline from Redmond's dinner at Cambridge Street to the Waldorf Bar, and finally to the street where he was killed. The methodical precision of the hit confirmed what detectives already suspected. Redmond's killers were highly organized and had intimate knowledge of his routines. Even as the initial investigation concluded, Strathclyde police maintained that this case would not be easily solved. Redmond's high-profile criminal background, the professional nature of the assassination, and the fear that gripped potential witnesses made it one of the most challenging investigations in Glasgow's recent history. The murder left the city in shock, but for the Underworld, it was a stark reminder of the lethal consequences of crossing one of East End's most feared figures. The investigation into George Redmond's murder quickly focused on those with the clearest motives. Rival drug dealers, particularly David Mincy Mackenzie, stabbed by Redmond in 2006, were obvious suspects. Redmond's role as an enforcer for the McGovern cocaine network meant he had made enemies inside his own organization, as well as with anyone whose debts he had violently enforced. Former police officer Michael Norden, run over in a Porsche by Redmond just months earlier, also fell under scrutiny, though the calculated nature of the hit suggested it was more than a spur-of-the-moment revenge attack. Police suspected the murder was ordered by a rival gang figure and executed by professionals. The use of a stolen Porsche with false plates, a convoy of vehicles, and an automatic pistol fired at close range pointed to a planned, coordinated strike. It wasn't a street argument gone wrong. It was a precise, public warning. Family and insiders offered additional theories. Pat Redmond insisted George's reputation as a gangster had been exaggerated, suggesting that financial disputes or unpaid debts could have motivated someone to hire killers. Meanwhile, Underworld sources speculated the hit was linked to Redmond's cocaine enforcement activities, a warning to anyone stepping out of line. Despite these leads, no charges were ever brought. Witnesses remained silent, rivals vanished, and the case faded into one of Glasgow's most enduring mysteries. The combination of professional execution, a crowded public setting, and the East End's code of silence ensured the killers could operate with impunity. Redmond's murder remains unsolved, a puzzle of suspects, motives, and shadowy theories that continue to grip Scotland's underworld. George Redmond's murder remains one of Glasgow's most notorious unsolved gangland killings, and the reasons are as complex as the man himself. From the outset, The case faced structural and cultural barriers that slowed every investigative effort. Glasgow's East End, where Redmond lived and operated, has long been shaped by a strict code of silence. Witnesses feared retaliation, meaning critical first-hand accounts were scarce or entirely absent. Even those present at the scene or nearby were unwilling to speak publicly, leaving police with little more than physical evidence and conjecture. The execution itself added another layer of difficulty. The hit was professional, suggesting the involvement of experienced criminals who understood how to evade surveillance and leave minimal trace. By the time the vehicle was found burnt out in Gartkosh, much of the forensic trail had already disappeared. Investigators also identified a blue Ford Focus traveling in convoy with the Porsche, but it too led to dead ends. Compounding the challenge, Redmond had built a life intertwined with multiple criminal networks. His disputes with rival dealers, his debt enforcement for the McGovern cocaine clan, and his violent reputation created a long list of potential suspects. With so many plausible motives, narrowing the field proved almost impossible. Police faced not just a lack of cooperation, but a crowded criminal landscape where anyone might have had the opportunity and reason to order the hit. Public perception also complicated the investigation. Redmond's reputation as a feared enforcer meant that some authorities and media sources viewed him as a figure who got what was coming, subtly shaping investigative priorities. Over 15 years later, the combination of a professional assassination, a hostile criminal environment, and the unwillingness of witnesses to come forward has left George Redmond's murder officially unresolved. The case remains open, a stark reminder of how the city's underworld, fear, and meticulous planning can keep even the most violent crimes beyond the reach of justice. If you're captivated by the hidden layers of Britain's darkest crimes, share your thoughts or theories on George Redmond's murder in the comments. Hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and ring the notification bell so you never miss an in-depth exploration of the UK's criminal world.